Attention all F1 fans. Daniel Ricciardo might be the best F1 driver not currently on the grid. It seems like just a matter of time until we see the former Red Bull driver back in the sport. But where could he go? Well, let's take a look at the options that Daniel Ricciardo has, as well as what is the most realistic destination for the Aussie. Some of you might just know Daniel Ricciardo as the lovable Aussie who's mainly seen on the Red Bull YouTube channel at the moment. But when he first drove for the team in 2014, he was seen as a future world champion and an incredibly exciting prospect in the sport. A lot of people forget that in Ricciardo's first season with Red Bull, he outperformed Sebastian Vettel, who was a defending 4-time world champion at the time. Since then, he might not have completely made the most of that potential. Ricciardo was able to win 7 races with Red Bull and 1 more victory with McLaren. At 34 years old, it seems unlikely that Daniel Ricciardo will be a Formula 1 world champion by the time that his career ends. There are definitely some fans who believe that Daniel Ricciardo should not be in Formula 1 anymore. His time with McLaren in 2021 and 2022 were both pretty terrible, outside of his surprise victory in Monza. While having Lando Norris as a teammate is not the easiest thing, Ricciardo being outperformed by 45 points in 2021 and then a whopping 85 points in 2022 shows just how much Ricciardo was struggling. If you're going to drive like that, you're going to have a very short career in Formula 1. But that glosses over how good Danny Ric really is. He is one of the most experienced men in the sport and has driven at the front of the grid in the past. At 34 years old, he still has a lot to give to the sport, especially when you consider how good Fernando Alonso has been in his age 41 season. The year out of the sport sounds like it's doing a lot of good for Daniel, and it sounds like exactly what he needed to resurrect his career in Formula 1. So if Daniel Ricciardo is to return to Formula 1, where could he go? There is another universe out there where Daniel Ricciardo is the golden boy of the Red Bull team, and he's the one on track to win his 3rd world title with the team. But that of course did not happen, and Ricciardo left the team to the surprise of pretty much everyone at the end of the 2018 season. He is of course back with the team now, being announced as the 3rd driver for the 2023 season. Being in that 3rd seat means that Ricciardo would be in the perfect position to step back into that car, and there are a lot of positives going for him. For one thing, Daniel has a great relationship with the team. In 2018, despite the rising star of Max Verstappen, Red Bull were fully committed to holding on to the Aussie driver, and also expected to before he moved to Renault. The relationship clearly was not hurt by Ricciardo leaving, otherwise the team would not have bought him back. So if Red Bull got to the end of the season and thought that they needed a change, Danny Ric would know the ins and outs of the team perfectly, and would be able to step in straight away. There has been some talk about whether Daniel Ricciardo is really with the Red Bull team because he is a candidate for the seat, or whether he's simply there for attention he will bring the team. Former F1 world champion Damon Hill expressed this concern about Ricciardo, saying, "He does an awful lot of PR work and I'm just wondering if he's there for the cameras. I'm hoping that in there is a determined racing driver who wants to prove to everyone that he's still got it." There are some concerns that Red Bull are not seriously considering him, especially with how involved he is with the media. But that is more down to Ricciardo being such a great personality and a bit of a media darling. Damon Hill also spoke about how Red Bull are talking about Ricciardo. Hill said, "It's that story about a prodigal son. He ran off, thought the grass was greener somewhere else. It wasn't, and he had a bit of a torrid time at McLaren. The way that Christian Horner is talking, it's as if they're trying to rebuild him." It does seem like something out of a movie that Ricciardo would return to Red Bull and get back in the seat. Considering Red Bull have the fastest car on the grid at the moment, Daniel Ricciardo would certainly win races in that Red Bull car. While Danny Ric is probably desperate to get the seat in the fastest car on the grid, there is another Red Bull-controlled seat which seems to be a more likely destination for him. There are reports that he could now be open to a move to AlphaTauri, having initially narrowed down his target teams to the ones at the front of the grid. Nick de Vries has not started the season phenomenally well, and Red Bull's patience could wear thin with the former F2 winner, especially if a great candidate is already in the garage. AlphaTauri is very much seen as the team where drivers get ready to jump into the Red Bull seat. While this is usually reserved for young drivers making their debut in the sport, it would not be the first time that we have seen a more experienced driver given their second chance with AlphaTauri after leaving Red Bull. Pierre Gasly secured his move to Alpine because of his brilliant second stint with Red Bull's second team, and Ricciardo could do exactly the same thing. Sergio Perez's contract with Red Bull expires at the end of the 2024 season, so if Ricciardo showed he still had brilliant pace with AlphaTauri for a season, he could be in a great position to move back into the Red Bull seat. One of the more interesting rumours circulating the paddock on where Daniel Ricciardo could end up is a move to Mercedes. When the Aussie was considering his options in 2018, Mercedes seemed to be pretty high on his list, mainly because they had by far the fastest car on the grid at the time. While the Silver Arrows have slipped a little down the order, they would still be a great destination for Ricciardo. Despite saying he could drive in Formula 1 for another 5 years, Lewis Hamilton still has not signed a new contract with Mercedes for beyond 2023. The issue for Mercedes is that if Lewis decides to retire at the end of this season, then all of the top drivers are under contract until the end of 2024. With Mick Schumacher and Logan Sargent the only realistic other options who aren't under the contract, Daniel Ricciardo seems like the best bet for Toto Wolff's team. This all depends on whether Lewis really does want to sign another contract with Mercedes, but if he does choose to walk away, Daniel Ricciardo would be a brilliant option. But Mercedes seems like it would not be the only for Ricciardo if he wanted a podium-challenging car. Aston Martin have all of the pieces in place to be consistently on the podium. Fernando Alonso has shown this season that the new car is fast, and he seems a likely candidate to challenge Red Bull in the future. But Lance Stroll is struggling a lot more than the team would have hoped. While his teammate is consistently getting on the podium, Stroll is struggling to break into the top 6 and has yet to get a podium this season. In fact, Alonso has scored almost 3 times as many points as Stroll across the first 8 races. Of course, this is not any normal driver struggling. Lance will certainly be in for some preferential treatment because his dad owns the team. You wouldn't want to be in the room when the team suggests to Lawrence Stroll that they should probably replace his son. But if Aston Martin are serious about becoming one of the top teams in the sport, it seems like Lance Stroll needs to go. Daniel Ricciardo would be a brilliant alternative, as he is incredibly fast, as well as already having race-winning experience. We know that the Alfa Romeo team won't continue being the Alfa Romeo team in the next few years. The name will disappear and the team will become an Audi Works team from the 2026 season onwards. Teams that are new to Formula 1 value experience massively, especially when they have the budget to get some of the best drivers available. At the moment, it seems like Zhou Guanyu is likely still going to be with the team as he brings in a lot of money, as well as being an exciting young driver. But we have started to see Valtteri Bottas struggle a little bit more in 2023. He has just 2 points more than his teammate after 8 races, and is certainly not showing his veteran experience at the moment. We know that Bottas has a lot of other interests outside of the sport, which could influence his choice in his career. The break certainly sounds like it could do Ricciardo a lot of good, so he might be the perfect person in that seat to replace Bottas. It seems like at the moment, Red Bull are particularly keen on keeping hold of Daniel Ricciardo. AlphaTauri's boss has talked about finding drivers who have matured enough to drive in Formula 1, and that is certainly the case with Ricciardo. I don't think we've seen the last of Daniel Ricciardo in Formula 1, and the AlphaTauri seat seems the most likely for him in 2024. But what do you think? Where do you think Daniel Ricciardo is going to go to next? Could he step back into a car towards the front of the grid straight away? Or does he need a midfield move first? Why not put your thoughts in the comments down below? While you're down there, why not hit the like button and subscribe? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.